Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli back out here in the shop, and I've got another good topic for you today. And today, we're going to be talking about the best wintertime bass lure ever created. Man, that's a tough one. And this one came through multiple questions we had on YouTube. People saying, what is the best wintertime bass lure ever? And man, I thought about it, and it was hard because when I thought about it, there's 5 or 6 that came to my mind. Suspending jerkbait is a great one in the wintertime. A jig fished on the bottom is a great one in the winter. Man, a metal blade bait or tail spinner in the winter? How you gonna beat that? But there was one lure that kept coming up in my mind over and over that has consistently caught numbers and big fish in the winter for me. And I gotta select this one for my best winter lure ever for fishing cold water conditions. It's gotta be that Rapala Shad Wrap. The Rapala Shad Wrap. And I love crankbait fishing. I'm a crankbait guy, a hard lure plug fisherman. I love it. And I fish lots of different shapes and brands and colors. But when the water gets cold, when it's wintertime fishing, right? Remember, wintertime fishing means the coldest water temperature of the year. When that water gets cold, I don't think you could beat the good old-fashioned Rapala Shad Wrap. I'm going to go into the reasons why. I'm going to show you a couple modifications. But before I do that, let me tell you that wintertime conditions, the coldest water of the year, the coldest air of the year, I don't care where you live. If that water's at its coldest point, this Shad Wrap is going to come into play. But specifically, when I'm looking at my water temperature gauge, I drop my trolling motor and I'm looking at that gauge. If that water temperature is in the low 50s all the way down to the 30s, and for some parts of the country, you're not going to see water that cold, but a lot of places you're going to see it. When water gets into the 30s to 50s, that thing right there is really, 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 really hard to beat. When you look at a Shad Wrap, you know, it's got a couple elements that make it special, that make it better than every other crankbait in the winter. First one is the construction of the body. And Shad Wraps are balsa, right? They're pretty light baits, but because they're balsa, it's subtle, it's quiet. Listen, ready? Nothing. Shad Wraps don't even have a little knock or any kind of rattle in it whatsoever. So that balsa's subtle. It doesn't make a lot of noise. But here's the big one. The Shad Wrap has the ultimate tight wobble to it. And that's what makes this one of the best winter baits out there, is this ultra tight, little subtle side to side. And one of the best ways to describe it is when you throw a Shad Wrap out there and you reel it back, you can hardly feel it. You just feel a little, just a little, very subtle. Most crankbaits out there, when you throw them out and you reel them back, you feel, you see your rod tip pumping, you see a big, on this one, tight, very subtle. And when you look at the lips on these Shad Wraps, and I'm going to talk about a few different sizes, but it's very in line with the body, right? It's at a subtle angle, almost horizontal with the body, and that bill, plus the balsa, plus the silent nature, no rattles, tight wobble, make it a great bait in the winter because it imitates the forage, right? When that water reaches its coldest point of the year, 50 degrees, 45, 40, 38, whatever. The things that bass are eating are moving slow and tight. They're not making big movements, right? If you're trying to imitate a threadfin shad, right? That threadfin shad is cold. His metabolism's low. That threadfin shad's barely moving. It's tight movement. Not big side to side, not trying to get away. Slow and tight. That's how that threadfin shad's actually moving. And that's exactly what that imitates. How about a crawfish? How about a crawfish, right? You've seen a crawfish in the summer. You spook it, you scare it, and it's throbbing back. It's big, giant, moving away. You ever see a crawfish in the winter? You ever turn over a rock in the winter and look at that crawfish? He's dormant, and he barely tries to move away, right? Real slow. His metabolism's lower. He's not moving fast. That Shad Wrap just ticking along the bottom real slow, back and forth. Look at the angle of the bill hitting the bottom, right? Looks like a crawfish, right? Barely moving, slow and tight. So a Shad Wrap is a perfect imitator of the forage in the winter, okay? So it fits the bill to a T on what you want in the perfect bass lure. The other thing I love about it is because it's a crankbait, I can cover a ton of water with it. Even fishing it slow, I can cover more water with a Shad Wrap than I can with a suspending jerkbait or a jig or a slow finesse bait like a drop shot, right? I can cover more water, but I can still fish it slow. That's another reason this got the nod over those other baits, because in the winter, I still have to find them, right? Another reason is a Shad Wrap in this cold water winter period is a twofer crankbait, a 2-4. It's great when fish are suspended, and it's great when fish are on the bottom. And I can take a Shad Wrap. This happens to be we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a second. This is a shallow Shad Wrap, size 5. And I can put bigger hooks on it, and I could fish it like a jerkbait. I could fish it in the middle of the water column for fish that are suspended. And when that thing stops, it rises ultra slow or just sits there, neutral buoyancy. But I can also fish that Shad Wrap toward the bottom. This is a number 7. If I throw this on 8 or 10 pound line, I can get this thing about 6, 7 feet. I can bump along the rock or the gravel or down a bluff. I can nick the bottom. So I could also fish a Shad Wrap on the bottom. So it's a 2-for lure on covering those wintertime zones. Suspended fish in the middle, all the way to those fish that are on the bottom. This is winter, a lot of fish down on the bottom, okay? So it's a great coverage bait. All right, I want to tell you about these sizes, and these are for sure my 2 favorite sizes, and throw in the shallow lip to make 3. The number 5 and the number 7 Shad Wrap are really what I throw in the wintertime. When you look at it, they're small profile baits. You've got the number 5 is about a 2.5 or 3 inch bait. You've got the number 7, it's about a 3 or a 4 inch bait. So it's a really good size profile on what they're going after. When it's cold and it's winter, they're not chasing giant stuff. They want easy meals, right? They want meals that are easy to eat, easy to get. And that number 5 and number 7 do a great job of imitating that. The diving bills are great for that, call it 3 to 7, 8 foot range. That 5 and that 7, look at that diving bill. But the sleeper is that same number 7 or number 5 with that little scoop bill. I call it a scoop bill because it just goes down and makes a little scoop, a little angle, a little right angle. And there it goes right there. And that's a sleeper. This is the shallow Shad Wrap in the 5 or 7. And when you want to stay in that shallower zone, let's call it 3 or 4 feet for suspended fish to real shallow fish that are a foot or 2 down, that's a sleeper. The shallow Shad Wrap in the size 5 and 7. All right, let's talk about a couple modifications to make this bait a little better, and to take it from a great winter lure to an even better winter lure. It's real easy to make these modifications. And the number one thing I'm going to do, this is on the 5 and 7, and it's on the diving and the shallow, the scoop bill, is I'm going to put bigger hooks on it. Okay, so I want you to look at that. I go 1 size up in my hooks. Okay, 1 size up on my hooks. So that means for the size 5 Shad Wraps, I'm taking off the factory 6s and I'm putting on size 5 treble hooks. On the number 7 Shad Wraps, shallow and diving, I'm going to take the stock 5s off and I'm going to upsize to size 4. So I'm going 1 full size bigger on the hook. And then the second thing I'm going to change out of the pack, nice save, Jeans, is I'm going to add a snap or a split ring. Okay, I hope you can see that right there. Dangling on both of those line ties, I have a black snap, and on this one I have a silver split ring. I want to call these size, 4 to 8. I think these are size 6 snaps and split rings. And what adding that snap or that split ring does is it gives it a little bit more weight and just a little bit more fluidity of movement, just a little. So the addition of 1 size bigger hooks and a snap or a swivel is going to make this bait suspend. The 5 or the 7. And when I reel it down, if I'm bumping the bottom with the 7 and I stop it, remember it's balsa. Balsa is a buoyant material. But 1 size bigger hooks, a split ring or a snap, when I stop it, slow rise. Almost suspending, just barely rising. Once again, jump back to these fish, these bass. They're lethargic. They're eating stuff that's moving slow. So when that fish sees that Shad Wrap, ding, 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 ticking along the bottom, and you stop it, and it just barely starts floating, it gives them time to get it. It looks natural. It's a vicious bite. Same thing with that shallow one, right? If I'm fishing as a suspending jerkbait style, I'm fishing for suspended fish, I reel it down and I make little twitches and stop it, that Shad Wrap, number 5, shallow Shad Wrap, just sits there, just like a suspending jerkbait. Fish can't stand that movement because it's natural. It's real. All right, one last thing, and I know you've probably seen this in some other videos, but I want to throw it out there, is I love to dull the colors of these baits down a little bit in the winter. There's lots of different ways to do it. You can bake them, you can leave them in the sun, you could use a fluorescent light and bake them. But real easy on the fly, I like to take a fine grit sandpaper. It's a 120 or a 150 grit sandpaper, and I just dull down that finish, right? A lot of these Shad Wraps out of the box have almost like a shine or sheen to them. This is one of the best winter colors out there. This is a color called Original Crawdad. And all I do is I just take that fine grit sandpaper and I'm just trying to dull it down a little bit. I'm trying to remove that flashy shine and just make it a duller color. I do the same thing with the shad colors. That's an original shad color in the 7. Get that 120 grit sandpaper and I just want it toned down a little bit. I want it toned down. I don't want it to have that shine. And you can see the difference right there between the portion that I sanded and the portion I didn't. It dulls it down, makes it more neutral. And that's natural and real in the winter. The forage is more toned down and dull. So by sanding it down on the fly, you can mimic that same thing. All right, last but not least, I do want to talk about the rod and the reel and my preferred method to throw these balsa shad wraps, especially in the winter. And to me, these are spinning rod crankbaits. Even the 7, right? Even the 7, which is a little bigger, man, that's light. If I put this on a digital scale, that thing doesn't weigh a 16th, maybe a 16th of an ounce, somewhere between a 16th and an 8th. Very, very difficult to throw the 7, especially the 5, on a casting rod. So my preferred method for these wintertime shad wraps is a longer, medium light spinning rod, right? Something longer with a more parabolic tip. The rod that I throw it on, it's a rod I designed for Abu Garcia. It's a 7.4 medium light Abu Garcia Ike series finesse rod. So anything I would say 7 to 7.5 foot that has a medium or medium light tip, especially a medium light, great rod for these little shad wraps. Pair that with a 30 or a 40 size spinning reel. The 40 I like a lot. It holds a little extra line. And the ultimate way to throw it is straight fluorocarbon or braid to a fluoroliter, light braid to a fluoroliter. And especially light braid to a fluoroliter will really, really chuck this thing a far ways. Even that little tiny number 5. I mean, it doesn't weigh anything. It's balsa. But on a 7.4 medium light with a 40 size reel, I'll spool it up with 10-pound braid, and I'll use a 6 or 8-pound fluorocarbon leader, a little bit longer leader, and I can get this bait really far on the cast. I mean, 40, 50, 60, 80 feet, 100 feet, no problem on a spinning rod, on a casting rod. It's really difficult. So spinning rod is preferred gear for that shad wrap in the winter. Man, what a tough decision, but I had to make it, and I'm saying my top wintertime lure of all time, Rapala Shad Wrap. Use some of those tips, upsize the hooks, dull it down, fish it in the middle, fish it at the bottom, and you're going to get some of the biggest bass you've ever caught in cold water conditions on that lure right there, the Rapala Shad Wrap. I hope you enjoyed this one, man. It was a tough decision, but for sure, this is one of my best winter baits. Man, if you like all this info you're hearing, if you like this knowledge that I'm trying to share, do me a favor. Like this page, subscribe to this page, hit that button down there. If you're already subscribed, tell your buddies about Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. Every single week, we got a new piece of content coming straight at you to help you become a better angler. Good luck. Try Shad Wrap. You're going to have fun this winter. Bye.